Welcome to Tech on Deck, a podcast series focusing on the critical business challenges facing B2B tech firms, with an emphasis on enabling technology. I'm your host, John Ragsdale. Today we are talking about how hardware and device manufacturers and partners shifting to a subscription business model can improve service delivery, introduce new offers, and enhance the customer experience. Our guest today is Andrew Gross, Vice President of Sales for TSIA partner Xyte. The Xyte Device Cloud is a fast and easy and cost-effective path for hardware and device manufacturers to launch a branded device cloud, resolve issues remotely, offer subscription pricing, and provide continuous value to customers long after the equipment has shipped. Andrew, welcome to Tech on Deck.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Well, I recently did a Tech on Deck with your co-founder and CEO, Omer Brookstein, and we talked about the opportunities for new subscription revenue streams with managed services in the cloud. But moving to on-premise to the cloud isn't just about revenue. Can you talk about how manufacturers, integrators, consultants, and end users are leveraging cloud technologies to reduce downtime and improve service delivery?
So I think when we say the cloud, I think we got to define it first, because there's a lot of misconceptions when people say the cloud. They're like, oh, I already use Gmail and G Drive. My stuff's in the cloud. I'm ready to go. What we're talking about when we say the cloud, especially when it comes to connected devices, is very specifically related to your device, the thing that you make in the field, reporting its data and usage and capabilities to a central repository, which of course is what we're referring to as the cloud. Now, what is the opportunity here with that is what you can do once that information is getting itself to the cloud. And that's what's something we're very excited about, because it affects everybody within the value chain. What I mean by the value chain is the manufacturer, their reseller and installer, the service provider and integrator, and of course the customer. Because once you have a device or a collection of devices, ideally, which is what is very exciting about this new wave of, especially in the integrated world, of devices communicating with each other, now reporting to a central cloud standard, is you have the ability not just to gain visibility and data and information about your device, but the system as a whole. And that's where the action and the positive effect starts to take place. So if you think about it from a manufacturer standpoint, John, I sold a thing out into the field, and I had no idea how or even if that thing was being used. That's step one. Checkbox, we solved that, right? You now, as a manufacturer, have the ability to get device level data, of course, secure and personal information sharing data from the device, but device level data, how is it being used? What features are more common than others? Is it really providing the benefit and solution to the customer? Now I have that. But when you get deeper into, well, who sold it, who installed it, who programmed it, who's using it, that's actually where my excitement around device level data in the cloud becomes even greater, because now you're understanding, okay, well, if that thing isn't working well, how can I take action on that? Now an installer or an integrator can be more proactive instead of reactive. Previously, it was always, I'm getting a call from my customer because the thing already broke. But why at 6 a.m. that morning did I not proactively get an alert that said, hey, this device has gone offline. You should go on site, or even better, in the cloud remotely, take effect on that system and fix it. And same goes with the end user. Now that end user, especially in integrated spaces like conference rooms and boardrooms, where you have manufacturers of cameras and touchscreens and displays and audio devices all coming from different manufacturers, now that data in the cloud is being communicated and affected together because they're reporting to the same thing. So now, instead of telling me that my camera isn't working, I know that my room isn't working because the camera is an integral part of that room. And now me as the user know not to go to that room because I'm getting that proactive information. So in general, John, to your question, the answer is that all of these things, these devices in a connected environment that we live in so often today, when reporting to a central cloud, which is what we're offering, gives so much incredible benefits from the manufacturer to make better products moving forward, all the way down to the user to start using their spaces of which those products are being installed, using those environments more effectively.
Well, it's interesting because one of the most common upsell options for support and field service groups is selling like full environmental support. So you're not just supporting your devices, you're supporting the environment they're in. And that was really hard in the on-premise days because you didn't have access to that equipment. So it's sounding like you're making it a lot easier for companies to really enable this upsell potential to support not only their devices, but everything it's connected to.
Yeah, to your point, when I say when an installer or an integrator sells a service contract, you're not really selling a service contract for one device. You're selling the service contract for the entire environment. I tell a lot of customers all the time, I said, let's get away from managing things to managing spaces. And the only way you can do that is if those things are all communicating to a central cloud, to our first conversation. But those installers, those service providers, they love this because now not only are they able to sell more service contracts, but happier customers is good for business. You know, I'm not saying your service contracts go away, quite the opposite. Your service contracts become just that much more valuable because now you have an actual service platform to deliver on that service contract, and your work with that customer is actually lower cost on you as a integrator or a service provider, but your customer is fine with paying that money because they're getting a better service out of it. They're getting faster service out of it. So those happier customers, those cloud-based integrations and management and control, it honestly is only a positive impact on both ends.
Yeah, and I love the point you made about being more proactive. So you're hopefully eliminating downtime entirely, or at least cutting it, reducing it dramatically. So big impact on the customer experience.
Yeah, it is. Your space and your technology that everybody, especially as manufacturers, you go out there and you market the greatest new hologram video conferencing solution and the greatest new 8K camera. But let's be honest with ourselves. One, those things all have to work with other things. That's the first, point, because you're never walking into especially a conference room, just using that as our basis, and it's only one manufacturer of technology in the space. There's always more than one. But two, that new great technology that you just introduced and marketed to the world, it's only cool if it's working. So having a platform to ensure that it's turning on is just better for business for you as a manufacturer, because now your new stuff can actually be used.
So over the last decade, we've seen this huge move from ownership to usership models. It started in the consumer world with companies like Netflix just changing the way that we interact with technology, but now it's moved to the enterprise world as well. What would you say are some of the challenges faced by device manufacturers evolving to this usership models, and how can the cloud help with that?
When we were talking about this conversation, and I was, thinking a little bit about the importance of this specific topic, which was usership and recurring revenue streams, and really turning into the subscription model that we see in the consumer world, finally bleeding into the B2B space. I started to ask myself, what is the barrier, and what is maybe something that is going to be our first step into this environment? Because I've been doing this for a long time, and with Xyte, and when we really started, obviously, this entire business thought process of, hey, you want to get there, well, we're the guys with a platform to get you there faster at a lower cost and much more secure. What I've noticed in these conversations with thousands of manufacturers across almost every industry is that the long-term strategy is to move towards usership models. And usership and subscriptions, those are defined differently by every manufacturer and by every market. And I think that's just a reality that we have to accept. So what I have seen in those thousands of conversations is turning hardware, and what I like to call SaaSifying hardware, is really, I think, step two. And the reason why is because that is a change in behavior from the masses. I have to be okay buying this camera I'm talking to you on and the display that I'm viewing you on in this conversation, not as a $100 and $1,000 purchase, but actually a $10 and a $20 subscription. And not everyone's there yet. However, what they are ready for is looking at this camera and this display or any technology, but looking at it as when I buy it on day one, that's the worst it'll ever be. I'm going to have the opportunity to upgrade that system via licenses and features, all in the cloud. And that's going to be the usership model that I see as day one. Now, we'll get to that hardware world 100%. There's no doubt about it. It's just a matter of time. But where I see consumers in the B2B space, but also in the consumer space, who are really ready to adopt this, subscription-based models, is to embrace the idea of licenses and features and upgrades of my one-time purchases, which will then turn me into the ability to then, in the future, be more adopting of the idea of buying a piece of hardware on a subscription basis. And honestly, we see it even today, John, in Tesla, right? And I know this is, people roll their eyes. I got another Tesla example. I've got Apple examples for you too, if you want to roll your eyes more. But the Tesla example it's great, right? Because what Tesla did is they entered a old industry, right? The automobile industry is almost as old as it gets when it comes to technology. And they entered this space and really turned it on its head by saying, hey, buy your car the same way. Buy it up front, lease it through some bank. I'm not changing the way you buy your car. The difference I'm going to do is going to say, when you buy that car or you lease your car, I'm going to make sure that the day that Tesla gets into your driveway, it's the worst it'll ever be. And you can subscribe to horsepower upgrades. You can subscribe to software upgrades on the screen in your platform. And that Tesla will only get better because it's connected to a central cloud and getting updates via the cloud that you as a consumer have the ability to subscribe to. And maybe in the future, we can subscribe to Teslas as well. But the key reason I bring that up is because what that's done for someone like Tesla is it has completely changed the user retention. And I think that's what a lot of the manufacturers, the technology manufacturers that are listening to this and to your audience today are really looking for is not only how do I get new business and introducing new models, but also how do I keep the business I got? How do I make sure that the customer that I just sold to is coming back to me or sticking with me and not going to my competitor? And what we saw with Tesla was that they took an industry standard customer retention ratio of around 45 to 50% that you see with like Toyota and like in Volkswagen. They turned it into 90% of Tesla users and consumers coming back to Tesla. And I can't help but point to the fact that it was the ability for you to always have a better vehicle through the process of a central cloud, being able to push licenses, features, and upgrades to you as a consumer on a subscription model. And I use that in comparison whenever talking about high tech, because I think it would work great in the B2B space.
Well, especially in an annual recurring revenue world, that renewal is almost more important than the initial sale. So if you're providing value at every step of the way, that renewal is really set up for success.
It is, absolutely. And sticky customers and returning customers, it's a lower cost of obtaining that customer as well. So you're actually saving money while keeping that customer. I mean, the benefits go on and on.
So I want to talk about something that we teased in the abstract. And way back in 2007, I did a series of research on what I called green services. And I have to say, I was a little early, and most of our members really weren't interested in the topic. But today, sustainability is top of mind in many industries. And I'm saying that our members are including sustainability data in annual reports. I'm hearing them in quarterly analyst briefings. So how are you seeing cloud technology foster sustainability for equipment manufacturers? And how is that helping companies achieve environmental goals?
You know, it's weird on the surface when you think about it, right? It's like, how the hell could a SaaSification of hardware help the environment? It's not obvious, right? But hear me out, because it becomes obvious when you start to pull the layers back. And I know we just talked about customer retention in the Tesla model. But think about what customer retention gets you, is that if I buy a piece of technology or subscribe to it in the future, right? Or now, ideally, because we have the platform and tools to allow you to do so, if that product's only getting better with time, through a centralized cloud license and upgrade model, I don't need to trash that equipment just because a new model came out. I can keep that hardware in the hands of my customer, and I can make it better and more modern and more up to date through software and licenses. So I'm saving on the trashing, right? Or the constant having to upgrade something just because a new model came out. That's actually a huge impact to sustainability goals, is that alone. But then you get into, we talked a little bit about proactive service and support, right? Because I know a lot of the customers and a lot of your audience listening to this, they're selling through integrators. They got installers and service providers. We talk about a managed service platform that this can bring. Well, when you're able to proactively manage and monitor things from a cloud platform from anywhere in the world, the reduction on travel alone, just to simply unplug something and plug it back in, huge impact on sustainability goals, right? So why should I take an unnecessary flight halfway across the world just to go to a conference room to reboot it when I can do that from my bedroom? Saving on sustainability, saving on travel. The last one is maybe the more obvious one, and I know it's a hot topic that's been thrown around there, but it is, I think, very important, especially in this upcoming, if not now, environment of recurring revenue or buying hardware on a subscription basis, which is sort of the circular economy. And where I take circular economy and apply it here to subscriptions for hardware is back to the idea of I buy something, I subscribe to a piece of hardware, and I'm going to upgrade it throughout its life cycle, for licenses and features. Amazing, hit sustainability goals there. But there is going to come a point where the hardware itself is only so powerful, and I will need to refresh that hardware. That's an understood reality of technology today. But when I do have to refresh that hardware, it should be done in a sustainable manner. And instead of me, who, as a consumer, I'm not an expert in taking this display or that light switch or anything and responsibly recycling or refurbishing it, but the manufacturers are. And that's where, if I have a subscription to hardware, I can have refresh cycles. And those refresh cycles, through a very easy method, I can go to a platform, press a button, trigger that return to that customer, or to the from the customer to the manufacturer. I send that piece of technology back. I receive my new one that allows me to continue to upgrade. But now when that manufacturer gets that old piece of gear, they've got several options in front of them. They can responsibly recycle. They can responsibly upcycle as well. They can take that gear and potentially sell it to more price-sensitive markets. And we're seeing this actually today, where, yeah, you may be selling to the big banks in Midtown Manhattan the newest piece of gear every year in a technology refresh, but the local law firm down the street, in Jersey or anywhere else, they may want to buy last year's model at a discount. And so you're not only just responsibly recycling it and checking off your sustainability metrics, but you're taking that technology and actually gaining new revenue streams off of it because you have a managed refresh process. Now, it does have to be managed. It does have to be done through that central repository. So if it's done responsibly from a user interface to your customer, the same interface that they're monitoring, managing, and servicing their equipment, I just press a button, and I now, as a manufacturer, can responsibly circularize that actual piece of technology. That starts to really check off your sustainability goals. So everything from keeping gear and technology in the hands of your customers longer, and not just trashing because a year came up. The ability for you to service customers remotely, huge. It's going to cut down on your carbon emissions, and circular goals of being able to take that gear, responsibly recycle or upcycle and resell that equipment to more price-sensitive markets, all through the SaaSification of hardware, really start to become more green.
Yeah, and all of those equate to cost savings for the company too. I mean, it's average cost of $300 to $400 just to roll a truck to make a repair. So it's a win-win situation.
It is, of course, and tax breaks on top of that, based upon the country or municipality that you're in, they really start to add up.
So we talked about the importance of renewal, but another critical thing in an annual recurring revenue world is expand selling. So that means you need a lot of offers to upsell to your customers. Can you give examples of manufacturers who are leveraging cloud technology to expand their offers?
Yeah, we actually have a really great partner of ours. They're in the audio space, professional audio space. They provide a bunch of the audio processing for restaurants and like hotel lobbies. Probably many restaurants you walk into and you're listening to music while you're eating. You don't even know who's processing that audio, but this company of ours, our partner of ours who used our platform is probably the one behind the scenes. What's really interesting what they did is they identified, we'll call it niche, but a huge opportunity in that market to keep their customers sticky, but give their salespeople the opportunity to upsell. And what it was they were going to these restaurants day one, when the restaurant was focused on their construction phase, day one, and said, hey, you can buy our audio processor that has, let's just say 10 outputs, right? Just for sake of this conversation. Awesome, I'm gonna buy that 10 output device today. But what they noticed in restaurants and in hotels, they're constantly expanding, or they're maybe putting up walls and creating private areas. Well, I'm gonna need maybe 15 audio processing channels, 20 audio processing channels, maybe even 50 to 100 audio processing channels. And what this company did with our platform was they, reduced their SKUs that they had to manage in SAP down to 1 or 2. They were providing the hardware capabilities to say up to 100 channels, even though they were selling 10 channels. So they were getting in easier. That was checkpoint number 1. How do I lower the barrier of entry to my product? Great, I've got my foot in the door, right? You've heard the term land and expand. I've landed, because now I've lowered my barrier of entry. Because a lot of these customers, they weren't buying 100 channels up front, but they were ready to buy 10. Then, once that customer was ready to expand, that salesperson went back to those restaurants and said, hey, I see that you guys are in phase 2 of your construction, or hey, I see you guys are putting a private space in there. Probably need some extra channels, right? That restaurant was expecting that salesperson to sell them a new piece of hardware and buy new integration services, but not the case. They said, hey, guess what? Because you're a partner of ours and you bought our gear, that channel can be upgraded. Go to your platform, choose the amount of more channels you need, and in a matter of seconds, that audio processor can be expanded up to 100 channels. And that customer is paying for those channels, obviously. But think of the cost savings that customer, that restaurant now is having by not having to rip and replace something, the cost savings of having to buy new integration services, and really just the own peace of mind that, wow, I bought something that now is only getting better and is ready for my expansion and my needs. And that manufacturer of that gear now has the ability to go back to all of their existing customers and realize new revenue opportunities, not always having to dig and find new restaurants opening up. Their existing customer base is also their new customer base. And I thought that was a great example, something more technical, but something we experience in everyday lives where we plan on what is going to happen day 1, but I want to be flexible enough with my technology to ready me for day 2, day 3, day 4.
Yeah, I love that because it's just a natural growth expansion of the account. So you're not going in and starting a sales cycle from day 1.
Yeah, and it's a better relationship too. Now that restaurant or whatever the install was is looking at that manufacturer that they bought from less as a transactional and more of a partnership relationship, because that's what the salesperson is building with them. They're like, no, I understand your needs, your problems. I understand where you're headed, and my technology that I'm selling you is going to support that.
So the new year is upon us. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I would love for you to tell me what are some of the up and coming cloud trends for manufacturers in 2025 that you are seeing.
So we honestly talked a lot about, I'd say most of them. We've talked about green initiatives for decades, but we're finally seeing a way to implement and take action on those. That was a big trend. We were talking about upselling. I see licenses and features and upgrades like that as a huge trend for 2025. I think that's really the biggest ones. I think one that maybe we didn't talk a lot about is the impact that the value chain, the center of the value chain, those installers and resellers and integrators of the manufacturers, the role that they're going to play in 2025, I think is going to be probably the biggest trend that I'm seeing. For so long, I've seen manufacturers feel that they need to put everything on their shoulders. Now, I've got to do it. I've got to find new customers. I've got to create new technologies. I've got to create new business lines and services. But I see actually now this SaaSification trend now coming not just on the manufacturers, it still will be there, but now the ability for those manufacturers to empower their channel partners to do more with their gear. We talked a little bit like proactive services, but also the ability to read data and take action on data, to be more of that consultative partner with the end customer because of the tools the manufacturer gave them. I see that as a huge, huge trend. And that can only happen if the manufacturer, the channel partner, and the end user all align on this like centralized cloud that, hey, we got to all get together, get our data together, because it's the only way that it can be properly read and acted upon. But I see those channel partners as being a big, big focus this year of finally doing something, or at least being able to do something with that data and realizing business from it.
Well, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you joining me today. You provided some excellent thought leadership for our listeners on how device manufacturers can embrace the cloud to boost revenue margins and improve the customer experience. And you also gave me a new word, SaaSification. I love that. So a big thank you to Andrew Gross, Vice President of Sales for Xyte, for sharing your insights. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this episode of Tech on Deck. I'll see you next time.